In this factoring lesson, we are going to learn about the greatest common factor. Now, the greatest common factor would be the factor that every term has in common. So the essential question you want to ask yourself is, what are all of my terms divisible by? If you take a look at our first example here, we have 5x minus 15. Well, what are 5 and 15 both divisible by? They're both divisible by 5. So what this is going to look like is we're going to divide both terms by 5, and we're going to pull that 5 to the very front. Then you want to ask yourself, what's left over? So if we started with 5x and we took a 5 to the very front, that just leaves x. And for the second term, if we started with negative 15 and we pulled that 5 out to the front, if we divided by 5, that leaves us with 3. So we have 5 times x minus 3. And the 5 is what we call the GCF, the greatest common factor. All right, let's try that same process with the second example. Here we have x cubed, y squared, plus xy to the fourth power. Now this one's a little bit more complicated because I have a ton of variables rather than coefficients and constants. So same process though, we're going to start by finding that GCF. We want to know what these two terms have in common. So if you look at the x's, the first one has x cubed and the second one has x. So they both have at least one x. So I'm going to put one x out in the front. And then if you look at the y's, the first term has y squared and the second term has y to the fourth power. So I see here that they both have at least 2. So you want the greatest common factor. You need to take out as much as you can from both that they have in common. So here they both have at least 2, so I'm going to take y squared out to the very front. Next, I'm looking at what's left over. So for that first term, we started off with x cubed, but remember we put one of the x's out in the front. So that's going to leave x squared. And we started off with y squared, but we moved 2 of those y's out in the front, so there's not going to be any y's left for that first term. For the second term, notice 1x, and we moved 1x to the front. So we don't have any x's left here. As far as the y's go, we started off with y to the fourth power, and we moved 2 of those y's out to the front, which leaves us with 2 y's left on the inside. So we're taking out the greatest common factor. We're taking out as much as we can from both of our terms. Let's look at the example on the bottom left. We've got 12y cubed minus 3y. So look at the whole thing here. Let's start with numbers first. 12 and 3, what are they both divisible by? Well, 12 is divisible by 3, so they're both divisible by 3. And how many y's do they have in common? This first one has y to the third power. The second one only has 1 y. So they both have at least 1 y. So we can put 1 y out. Okay, now the important part to see what's left over. So this first expression, we started with 12, but we factored out a 3. And we know 12 divided by 3 is 4. We also started off with y cubed, but we moved 1 y to the front. That's going to leave y squared. And for the second term, we started off with negative 3y, and we moved 3y out to the front. So think about it. If you started with negative 3 and you factor out a 3, negative 3 divided by 3 is negative 1. And you had a y, but you moved it to the front, so there's not any y's left on that second term. And that 3y out there, that is our greatest common factor. All right, last example, we've got negative 2a to the fourth power plus 8a. We want to know here, what are these both divisible by? So take a look at the numbers first. Negative 2 and 8. Well, starting with a negative here, these are both divisible by negative 2. And if we look at the a's, we have an a to the 4th power, and the a, they both have 1a, so we'll put 1a out in the front. Let's see what that leaves behind. For this first term, if you had a negative 2 and you move that negative 2 to the front, there's not going to be a coefficient left. If you started off with a to the 4th and you moved 1a out front, that's going to leave you with a to the 3rd power inside. Moving on, the second term, we started off with a positive 8, but we factored out a negative 2. 8 divided by negative 2 is negative 4. We also had an a with this term, but we moved 1a to the front, so we don't have any a's left with that second term. We have our GCF out in the front.